The Martian. The Martian is a science fiction film from 2015. The plot of the movie follows an astronaut named Mark Watney who's left behind on the planet Mars due to a fierce storm and is presumed dead by everyone back on Earth. With minimum supplies left with him, he must utilize everything that he's got to survive on the hostile planet. Meanwhile, after realizing that Mark is alive, the NASA crew works tirelessly on Earth to bring Mark back home. The movie starts with a mission, Day 18, where the team of NASA, Ares 3, is on Dalia Planitia, a plane of Mars, on an exploratory mission. The team of astronauts is collecting dirt samples from the planet for chemical analysis. They are in constant communication with Johansson and Beck and MAV, which is called Mars Ascent Vehicle. All of a sudden, Johansson gets an update of a storm warning that can topple their MAV. Seeing the weather update, the commander of the mission, Lewis, commands to abort the plan and prepare for an emergency exit. During the process of evacuating, the crew members face great difficulty due to the fierce storm and gust of wind. Unfortunately, astronaut Mark Watney is hit by a ginormous piece of debris, throwing him far from the rest of the crew. The crew tries to reach him, but a complete loss of signal makes it impossible. Lewis tries her best to search for Mark a little longer and orders the captain of the ship, Martinez, to leave if conditions get worse. But Martinez keeps insisting on Lewis to get back as he sets to launch the ship. Unable to find Mark, the commander gets back on the ship, leaving Mark behind, and since the telemetry from his astronaut suit was unable to be detected, Mark is considered dead. The rest of the crew on their MAV then take off for the orbiting vessel called the Hermes. On Earth, Dr. Teddy Sanders, the director of NASA, holds a press conference to update the public about the Ares 3 mission and declares Mark dead. Meanwhile, back on planet Mars, the storm has subsided. Mark wakes up with a metal rod impaled in his abdomen and a warning of critically low oxygen level. He rushes to the HAB, which is the crew's surface habitat, to treat his wound. Finally, with great difficulty, he takes out the metal rod from his body that ripped a hole in him and covers the bleeding wound. Then he logs into the HAB journal and begins recording a video diary to keep a record in case he doesn't make it. Since Mark is unable to communicate with Earth, his only chance of rescue is the next manned mission of NASA, which is scheduled to happen 4 years later. He's worried that until then, he will eventually run out of food supplies. Later, Mark searches through the HAB to take a look at a number of food supplies and starts rationing. Since the HAB was designed for 6 people, it only contains food that is fit for a group of 6. According to Mark's calculation, he can survive almost 400 days on the planet. To further increase the food supply, he decides to grow food on the planet, and since he's a botanist, he is confident that he can produce food on Mars. Days keep passing by and Mark starts building a garden inside the HAB. He uses 126 square meters of Martian soil, and to fertilize it, he utilizes the bio-waste of the crew. He cultivates whole potatoes from eyes taken from potatoes in wrapped meals. One day, he realizes that the garden will require a considerable amount of water to be farmable, and since he has a limited supply of it, he produces water from unused rocket fuel by taking hydrogen and oxygen together and then burning it. However, during the process of producing water, Mark forgets to account for the excess oxygen that he has been exhaling and mistakenly blows himself up. He learns from his mistake. He starts to process again and finally accomplishes it. After a few days, Mark is happy to see a plant embryo growing in the garden. Meanwhile, back on Earth, thinking that Mark is dead, Teddy Sanders holds his funeral in which he honors the legacy that Mark left behind and ensures that Mark's sacrifice will not go in vain. On the other hand, at the Johnson Space Center, Vincent Kapoor, the director of Mars missions, wants Teddy to give him more satellite time for which Teddy is not ready. Teddy wants to focus on Ares 4 supply missions that are coming up, in which they are to focus on the Schiaparelli crater. However, Vincent is adamant about bringing Mark's body home and convinces Teddy that if they do so, they'll receive more support from Congress. On the other hand, in the Mission Control Center of NASA, a satellite planner, Mindy Park, reviews satellite images and is shocked to notice moved equipment in the Dalia Planitia. She quickly gets into emergency contact for Vincent and informs him about the revelation. Despite everyone's reluctance, Teddy decides to keep it hidden from the Ares 3 crew who are in the Hermes, and he wants them to remain focused on their mission. Finally, the news about Mark is released to the public, and they raise multiple questions for Teddy to assure them about Mark's survival and rescue mission. Meanwhile, on Mars, Mark starts to study the Ares 4 that will land 3,200 kilometers away from where he is right now. The functional rover that he has can travel up to 35 kilometers, after which it has to be returned to the hab for recharging. So Mark begins modifying the rover for the journey to reach the Ares 4 MAV site. He doubles the battery life by scavenging the other rover. He then takes the rover on the journey with adequate food supplies to keep himself alive. During the journey, Mark faces great difficulty surviving the increasing cold, but after resisting turning on the heater to save his rover's battery life, he finally gives in. He thinks of a solution to his heating problem and digs up the radioisotope thermoelectric generator that his crew dug up when they arrived at the mission. It is because RTGs are dangerous to humans if they rupture around them. But having no other choice, Mark digs it up and carries it with him in his rover to keep himself warm. Meanwhile on Earth, Vincent answers the public's raising questions about Mark's journey and tells them that Mark is preparing to reach the Ares 4 MAV site to make contact with them. Later, Teddy asks Mindy to enlighten him about every detail of Mark's journey and gives her full authority over satellite trajectories and orbital adjustments. He also asks the Jet Propulsion Laboratory director Bruce to prepare measures to get a pre-supply for Mark ready within 3 months. Mitch Henderson, the Hermes flight director, thinks that the Ares 3 crewmates deserve to know that Mark is alive, but Teddy is adamant that he will let them know once a real rescue operation is planned. Back on the planet Mars, Mark comes to the hab and is happy to see his healthy potato plants growing. He keeps the large ones for himself and reseeds the smaller ones again. Later, seeing the Acidalia Plantea map, Mark suddenly gets an epiphany to retrieve the JPL Pathfinder probe, which fell silent in 1997 due to battery failure. Back on Earth, while tracking Mark's location, Vincent understands Mark's plan and quickly flies to JPL in California. Meanwhile, Mark finally digs up the Pathfinder and carries it in his rover to the hab to recharge it. On the other hand, Vincent finds the Pathfinder from JPL and lays it out to make a connection with Mark's Pathfinder. Mark uses the camera of the Pathfinder to establish visual contact with NASA. Mark jumps with excitement when he receives a signal from NASA. At first, through complex astrophysical engineering conversations using a still frame camera, Mark and NASA keep themselves connected. Later, NASA sends a software patch to link the rover with Pathfinder, enabling communications to occur easily by text. Mark bursts into tears when Vincent tells him that the whole world is rooting for him and that NASA is working towards a rescue operation until Ares 4 arrives. He then inquires about his crewmates and is mad to find out that the crew is kept in the dark about the fact that he's alive. Feeling embarrassed, Teddy finally allows Mitch to inform the Ares 3 crewmates about Mark. In the Hermes, Mark's crewmates receive a video message from Mitch informing them about Mark's survival. The entire crew is surprised to know this. Mitch constantly stresses the fact that the crew is not responsible for this situation, but Lewis feels responsible for leaving Mark behind. Days keep passing by and Mark remains connected with NASA. He even receives an appreciatory email from the president and also one from his university's alma mater congratulating him on colonizing Mars. Meanwhile, Teddy makes arrangements for sending food supplies to Mark. One day, all of a sudden, Mark faces a tragedy when the hab's airlock blows out. The explosion causes a breach in Mark's bodysuit, exposing him to critical oxygen levels. When Mark restores the pressure on his bodysuit, he's heartbroken to find all his potato plants dead after getting exposed to Mars' harsh atmosphere. When NASA finds out about the incident, Bruce is asked to prepare a space probe as quickly as possible to deliver food supplies for Mark so that he can survive until Ares 4 arrives. Finally, the Hermes crew is allowed to converse with Mark. Martinez tells Mark how they have been taking turns to complete his task and how they miss him immensely, and Mark is so happy to connect with his friends. Later, he throws out all the dead crops from the hab and rebuilds a door with a canvas to restore pressure and oxygen level. After counting the potatoes left, he's worried that there won't be enough for him to survive until the Ares 4 arrives. Teddy orders to skip the routine safety inspections of the space probe to save time, as he wants to arrange for Mark's food supplies as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Mark cuts down his appetite to save food for more days. Finally, after 4 weeks, Bruce makes the space probe called the Iris, which is ready to be launched. But since Iris was not tested before, it explodes as soon as it lifts off. Mark feels hopeless and asks Lewis to take care of his parents in case he dies. The news about the failing Iris spreads like wildfire, and many questions are raised against Teddy and Vincent. Meanwhile, the China National Space Administration has shown who has developed a secret booster that has enough fuel for a Mars injection orbit. The president of CNSA wants to help NASA and develop cooperation between the space agencies. NASA is informed about it, after which JPL Astrodynamics' Rich Purnell does his math and comes out with a mind-blowing idea. According to his plan, NASA should use the CNSA's booster to meet with the Hermes, which will then use Earth's gravity to slingshot back to Mars, saving 2 years of time than Ares 4. Rich demonstrates his idea to Teddy, who straightaway rejects it and kicks Rich out of his office. Teddy believes he can't risk the lives of 5 astronauts to save Mark. Mitch stresses to let Lewis make the call, but Teddy is adamant about using the CNSA's booster just to resupply Mark. Furious, Mitch secretly sends Rich plans to the Hermes crew. At first, Lewis is reluctant to follow the plan since NASA has expressly rejected it, but soon the entire crew unanimously votes to implement it without taking NASA's approval. Johansson disables NASA's remote controls and sends NASA a vague message stating Rich Purnell's name. Having lost control of the Hermes, Teddy has no choice but to support them publicly. He understands that Mitch was behind this fuss and asks him to resign after the mission is over. He then flies to China with Mitch, where he visits CNSA to meet the president. Meanwhile, Mark starts preparing for his 90-day-long journey to Schiaparelli crater, where the Ares 4 MAV is all set. He carries with himself as many supplies as he can. On the other hand, the Hermes crew inform their families that their journey will be extended for 533 days more. Finally, CNSA's booster is launched and meets with Hermes. 7 months later, Mark is shown preparing to leave for the Schiaparelli crater, where he's going to commandeer the Ares 4 lander. His actions are constantly being monitored by NASA. Bruce informs Mitch and Vincent that the weight of the MAV of Ares 4 must be lightened in order for it to pass Mars orbit. Therefore, the front of the MAV must be removed and covered with the HAB canvas to reduce the MAV's weight. Meanwhile, Mark finally reaches the Ares 4 MAV. As instructed by NASA, he starts getting rid of the unnecessary parts of the MAV. In the Hermes, Lewis assigns the crewmates their roles in Mark's rescue mission. On Mars, Mark bids farewell to his rover and finally enters the MAV. Back on Earth, a huge crowd gathers outside the Johnson Center as well as Times Square to see whether or not the mission to retrieve Mark will be a success. In the MAV, Mark gets ready to finally leave Mars. 2 minutes before the launch of the MAV, which is remote controlled by Martinez, Mark and the NASA team are anxious. Finally, the MAV is launched, rupturing the canvas that covered it from the top, which affects its velocity. Seeing this, Mark passes out and Lewis is unable to reach him. After a while, Mark finally regains consciousness, bringing a smile to everyone's faces. Lewis informs Mark that the velocity of the MAV is less than the Hermes. Mark gets an idea and offers to make a breach in his pressure suit and use the atmosphere thrust to propel himself to the Hermes. Lewis refuses Mark to do so, but gets an idea to use a bomb to breach the airlock, which will cause air to escape with the atmospheric thrust and slow down the Hermes. Vogel is asked to prepare an explosive, after which Beck sets it on the airlock. Lewis takes it upon herself to rescue Mark, as she can't afford to send everyone else and risk their life. Finally, the airlock is blown, which reduces the velocity. However, it's still not enough as Lewis is unable to reach Mark. Having no other choice, Mark makes a hole in his pressure suit and with great difficulty finally propels himself to Lewis. When Lewis informs the command center that Mark has been successfully rescued, the entire nation jumps with excitement. The NASA crew as well as the Hermes crew are in happy tears for their long-awaited success. After Mark returns to Earth, he becomes a survival instructor for astronaut candidates and uses his experience to teach them how to survive in the worst conditions. The film ends with the Ares 5 that is about to launch for Mars 5 years after Mark's rescue mission. Meanwhile, the Ares 3 crew members are seen leading their normal lives. The movie has a rating of 8.0 on IMDb. The budget of this movie was around $108 million, and at the box office, it earned $630.6 million. I hope you all liked the video. If yes, then make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more movie recaps.